Can you actually retire in the villages on Social Security alone? Here's the honest answer. You're about $1,100 short every single month. Not because the community is a bad deal, but because the real bill runs bigger than the amenity fee lets on. The average Social Security check in 2026 runs about $2,031 a month. The realistic cited cost of living here runs closer to $3,150. Nobody who's made a video about this place has stacked those two numbers side by side, with a source attached to each one. That's what the next few minutes fixes. Here's exactly where that $1,100 comes from. Picture one retiree, 68 years old, collecting the average Social Security check, no pension, and the house paid off outright by the time they move in. It's a common starting picture, and it's the exact math a lot of people run before picking the villages, because the marketing leans hard on paid off home plus Social Security, and that phrase alone shows up in more than one video title about this place. 3 counties split this community: Sumter, Marion, and Lake. 2 of the highest view videos about this place right now come from a local realtor and a couple who actually live there, and both of them are more honest than most of the doom content in this corner of YouTube. But neither one cites a source for a single figure, and the doom videos on the other side of that ledger rarely cite one either. That is the gap this video fills. Every number here traces to a dated source: the community's own 2025 court filings, county tax records, and a July 2026 cost breakdown published by a national personal finance outlet. Not a guess from a comment section, not an agent's memory of last year's fee, not a number that got repeated so many times across so many videos that it started sounding true. This matters beyond one community. Across this whole corner of YouTube, plenty of titles promise retirees can live somewhere on Social Security alone, then quietly build the example around a home priced well above what that check could ever carry, or around a single person's number applied to a couple, or the other way around. We are not doing that here. If the number does not work for a single retiree, we say so, plainly, before you spend an afternoon watching a virtual tour and falling in love with a golf cart parade. The structure is simple. 5 stacked costs: the amenity fee, the CDD bond, property tax, insurance, and healthcare. Then the math on what all 5 add up to against a Social Security check, for a single retiree and for a couple, because those two numbers are not the same video. Then the caveats neither the brochure nor the doom videos quite get right. Start with the one every single resident pays, no exceptions, no matter which village or which decade they moved in. The amenity fee runs around $200 to $204 a month as of 2026, and it is tied to inflation by contract, so it rises most years rather than sitting fixed at whatever number a 5-year-old video quoted. That fee is a fair trade for what it covers. More than 100 recreation centers, pools, executive golf walking access, and nightly live entertainment on the town squares that residents use, not just a brochure photo. Residents rarely complain about this specific line item, and the comment sections across dozens of videos on this topic back that up. What the fee does not include is longer than most buyers expect, and it is what nearly every cost breakdown of this place either skips or buries in a footnote. It does not include the bond, it does not include property tax, it does not include insurance, it does not include healthcare. Treating $200 a month as the cost of the villages is the single most common honest mistake we found across the videos covering this place, including some of the better ones, the ones that clearly did their homework everywhere except this one blind spot. So keep that $200 in your head as line 1 of 5. 4 more are coming, and the next one is the line item new buyers underestimate the hardest, because unlike the amenity fee, it is not the same number for every house. It is also worth noting that the FEE applies whether a resident uses every amenity daily or almost never leaves their own street, which is exactly why some longtime residents describe it as the best value in the entire budget, and others describe it as a cost they barely notice against everything stacked on top of it. The CDD bond is a community development district assessment that funds the roads, water lines, and infrastructure inside each specific district when it was originally built out. It typically runs $15,000 to $30,000, depending on which district a home sits in, and it can be paid off in one lump sum at closing or amortized annually onto the property tax bill, commonly adding somewhere around $1,000 to $2,000 a year until the balance is retired, sometimes over 15 to 30 years. Here's the part that trips people up, and it is the same warning a realtor working this exact market gives on camera. That bond balance is not a community-wide number. It varies house to house and district to district. A $350,000 home in a newer village can carry a $32,000 bond, while an older resale 2 villages over might carry almost none because its bond was already paid down by a prior owner years ago. Asking, "What's the bond here?" and accepting a neighbor's answer or a number from a video about a completely different village is how buyers end up surprised at closing. If catching a gap like that before it costs you is useful, subscribing keeps these dated, sourced breakdowns coming instead of another recycled estimate. If you're doing the math on a specific home, this is the line item to request in writing from the seller's disclosure before you make an offer, not after you've already pictured yourself on that porch. The number that matters is the one attached to that exact address, not the community average, and not whatever figure the last video you watched happened to use. There's a second reason to get this in writing rather than trusting a general range. Home price medians for this community get quoted constantly, and at least one widely cited figure turned out to be skewed by folding in a subset of homes inside a specific 55-plus enclave rather than the broader market. A bond figure has the same risk. A single anecdote from one district gets repeated as if it applies everywhere, when the real number is always district-specific and always worth confirming against the actual paperwork. 2 line items down, 3 to go, and the total is already climbing past what most of the cost of living videos on this topic ever mention. Here's a real question worth sitting with as we head into the next 3. Are you budgeting this as 1 retiree or 2? Drop it in the comments because the answer changes everything from here forward. Property tax is where the 3-county split shows up in a resident's mailbox every November. Sumter County carries one of the lower millage rates in the entire state of Florida. Marion County sits close behind it, and Lake County runs noticeably higher, especially in its incorporated areas. 2 homes that look identical, same floor plan, same age, same finish, same amenity fee, can carry meaningfully different annual tax bills purely because of which side of an invisible county line they happen to sit on. On a mid-$300,000 home, that county difference typically works out to a few $100s a year, not enough to make or break the decision on its own, but enough that what does the village's cost in property tax does not have one single answer. It has 3, and which one applies to you depends on the specific address and not the community's marketing materials, which understandably don't lead with, "It depends which county you're standing in." Put real numbers on that split. On a comparable mid-$300,000 home, Sumter County lands close to $2,500 a year after a standard homestead exemption. Marion County lands close to $2,400, and Lake County lands closer to $2,900. None of those numbers is dramatic on its own. Stacked against everything else on this list, a $500 swing between counties still matters to a fixed-income budget. It's also worth saying plainly because it's a common complaint across the broader Retire in Florida video corridor. No state income tax does not mean low property tax. Homestead exemptions and assessment caps can soften the bill for a long-time owner, but a new buyer paying full market value starts without that cushion. And the effective rate on that first year's bill, not the exemption-adjusted rate an existing owner enjoys after a decade, is the one that lands in a new resident's mailbox. Insurance is the line item most likely to look fine in year 1 and painful by year 5. On paper, Sumter County homeowners insurance runs somewhere in the $1,600 to $2,050 range annually, which sits meaningfully below the Florida state average. That's a true number, and it's the number most cost of living videos stop at, right before moving on to the pickleball courts. Here's the complication. Multiple longtime residents describe their own premiums nearly doubling since 2020, from around $2,400 a year to $4,500 or more today, because Florida's insurance market has been rising faster than Social Security's annual cost of living adjustment for several years running. Both things are true at once. The community sits below the state average on paper, and individual bills have still climbed hard in practice. A newer policy on an inland home looks very different from one that's been renewed for a decade on an older structure, and neither fact cancels the other out. Two more pieces worth knowing before you budget this line. Hurricane and flood coverage is frequently a separate policy from base homeowners insurance, not bundled in. And it's worth pricing both before you assume the lower figure covers everything a Florida storm season can throw at a roof. In some pockets of the state, and residents elsewhere in Florida have reported this loudly, homeowners describe a specific home as effectively uninsurable at any reasonable price after a claims history or a roof age cutoff, which is a risk worth checking on a specific property, not assuming away because the county-wide average looks reasonable on a spreadsheet. None of this means insurance makes the decision for you. It means the realistic budget line is the one closer to $4,500 a year for an established policy, not the $1,600 headline figure a newer buyer with a fresh policy and a brand new roof might get quoted. Healthcare access changed here in a way most of the recent videos about this place either skip entirely or soften into one short sentence. The Village's Health, the community's primary care system for years, filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. In July of 2025, after disclosing it owed the federal government roughly $361 million stemming from Medicare billing overpayments. One popular video on this exact topic calls that a billing dispute. Court filings describe a number large enough, on its own, to force a bankruptcy filing. Centerwell, the primary care arm of Humana, won court approval in September of 2025 to acquire the system's assets, and the completed purchase closed that same year for roughly $68 million. Nearly all the doctors and staff stayed in place afterward, and patients on United Healthcare kept their in-network access without having to switch providers. For most residents, day-to-day primary care continued without a visible disruption, and that part of the story is genuinely reassuring. The system got bought and mostly kept its staff is a very different sentence than nothing happened here, and it deserves more than the one soft line most videos give it before cutting back to golf carts. For specialists outside primary care, plenty of residents still make the drive to Orlando or another nearby city, which is simply the reality of living somewhere this size, no matter how much healthcare infrastructure exists inside the gates. Read the two extremes side by side, and the honest middle stands out. One popular video downplays a $361 million Medicare overpayment into a passing mention of paperwork trouble. A different corner of this same topic, the doom-framed videos, describe the community's healthcare system as having simply collapsed, full stop, no further detail. Neither version survives contact with the actual court record, a serious bankruptcy driven by a serious number that ended with continuity of care for most existing patients. A viewer deserves both halves of that, not whichever half makes for a better thumbnail. So which version would you have believed before seeing the actual filing? Worth saying in the comments. Now, stack all five, and this is the number the whole video has been building toward. The amenity fee, roughly $200 a month. The CDD bond, amortized, roughly $100 a month toward the higher end of that range. Property tax, call it $250 a month on a mid-size home, county dependent. Insurance, once you use the honest, risen figure rather than the cheerful year one quote, closer to $375 a month. Add utilities and internet around $300 a month, food for one person around $375, routine and out-of-pocket healthcare beyond Medicare premiums around $200, transportation including a golf cart around $350, and home maintenance reserve around $300. Stack every one of those honestly, and a realistic, fully cited total for one retiree living carefully, not lavishly, lands around $3,150 a month. The average Social Security retired worker benefit in 2026 runs about $2,031 a month. Subtract one number from the other, and a single retiree living on that average check is short by roughly $1,100 a month, and that gap repeats every month, not once a year, for as long as they live there. A couple, two average benefits combined, lands close to break even, with almost no cushion left over for a new roof, a bad medical year, or an insurance renewal that jumps another $1,000 overnight. "You have zero room for the next unplanned bill" is a far more honest sentence than "you'll be fine," and it's the one worth hearing before signing a purchase agreement. Notice what closed most of that gap for a couple. The amenity fee, small relative to everything else, had little to do with it. Two Social Security checks landing in the same household, covering costs that mostly don't double just because a second person moved in, did most of the work. That's the actual mechanism behind couples do fine. Singles come up short, and it's worth understanding rather than just memorizing the two headline numbers. A retiree with a higher than average Social Security benefit, or a pension layered on top, can close some or all of that gap without touching a single number in this breakdown. This video is not telling anyone what to do with their own benefit or their own income. It is describing what one specific place costs against one specific average widely cited number, so you can run your own household's real figures against it instead of someone else's assumed one. So if you've seen a video promising you can retire here on Social Security alone, the fair question is which version of that math they ran, and whether they ran it for one person or two. If someone in your life is looking at this exact community and running the wrong version of that math, this is the video worth sending them before they book the sales tour. So what do the existing videos about this place get wrong? Small omissions that add up, more than any big dramatic claim. The realtor covering the reasons people leave never mentions insurance once, in an entire video framed around cost. Several of the highest view why they're leaving videos never cite a single source for their numbers at all, which means a viewer has no real way to check any of it before believing it. And the framing that residents can retire here on Social Security alone almost never specifies the difference between a single retiree and a couple, even though that difference is the entire $1,100 gap we just walked through together. A few more deal breakers worth naming plainly, the kind that rarely make either the brochure or the doom videos. Traffic has worsened over the last several years as the community has grown past 170,000 residents, according to residents who've lived there a decade or more. Verify that any specific hospital or specialist you're counting on is still open and still accepting new patients before you buy, not after. And weather extremes, hurricane season chief among them, are a real planning line, not a footnote. None of that makes the Villages a bad decision for the right household. Longtime residents overwhelmingly report staying for decades and meaning it, and the community delivers exactly what it promises for most people, most of the time. What it means is that the honest version of this decision runs on 5 real, cited numbers, not one amenity fee and a brochure photo. Check the bond on the specific house. Check which county the tax bill lands in. Ask for the current insurance quote, not the one from 5 years ago. Confirm the healthcare picture for your own specific needs, not just the headline that the system got acquired. And run the math for your actual household, not the average one a video happens to assume for you. That's the real total. Not the brochure's version, and not the doom version either. Just the math, with the sources attached, for whichever household you actually are. If a future video on this exact topic tells you a number without telling you where it came from, that's the question worth asking before you believe it.